During a tense live exchange, U.S. politician Maxine Waters attempted to humiliate Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré with harsh words and public criticism. But just moments later, Traoré delivered a sharp and powerful response that left Waters completely speechless and the audience stunned. This unforgettable moment is now going viral worldwide. The studio lights glared, casting long shadows across the stage. Millions of eyes were glued to the live broadcast. The host had promised an unfiltered conversation between U.S. politician Maxine Waters and Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré. Nobody knew just how explosive it would become. From the start, Waters' tone was sharp, her words heavy with criticism. "Mr. Traoré," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Leaders like you pretend to care for your people. But in reality, you're nothing more than a reckless dreamer, dragging your country backward." Gasps echoed in the studio. Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Others waited for Traoré's reaction, but he didn't move. He sat upright, his eyes calm, hands folded like a soldier trained to endure fire without flinching. The host coughed nervously, sensing tension rising like a storm. Around the world, people leaned closer to their screens. What would happen next? Would Traoré lash out? Would he defend himself with anger? Nobody could predict that within minutes, a single sentence from him would leave the entire hall frozen in disbelief. Maxine Waters grew bolder. She leaned forward, pointing her finger, her words slicing the air like blades. "You stand there pretending to be some noble leader," she declared. "But to me, you are nothing more than a child playing dress-up in power you don't deserve." The audience gasped again, louder this time. The insult hit hard, echoing through the hall. Even the cameraman shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to keep filming. Waters smirked, convinced she had landed the final blow. For a moment, it seemed she had cornered Traoré in front of millions. But instead of replying, Traoré simply lowered his gaze for a brief second, as though gathering something deeper than anger. He inhaled slowly, then raised his eyes again, steady and piercing. The silence that followed felt suffocating. The audience leaned forward in their seats. Everyone expected fury. Everyone expected him to fight fire with fire. But what came out of his mouth next wasn't rage. It was something far more powerful. Traoré's voice was calm, almost gentle, but each word struck like thunder. "Madam," he said firmly, "you may insult me as a man, but you cannot insult a people who have chosen dignity over fear." The room froze. Every breath seemed to vanish. The smirk on Waters's face collapsed instantly, her lips parting in shock, but no words coming out. The audience erupted in applause, thunderous, uncontrollable, some even rising to their feet. Tears welled in the eyes of African students watching from the front rows, their hearts swelling with pride. In that single moment, Traoré had not defended himself. He had defended his nation, his people, and every small country ever dismissed by powerful voices. Maxine Waters sat speechless, her power dissolved by a truth too sharp to counter. The cameras caught everything, the stillness in her eyes, the steady resolve in his. And across the world, millions replayed that one sentence again and again, whispering to themselves, "This is what true leadership looks like." The applause did not fade quickly. It grew louder, rolling like thunder across the hall. Some clapped in rhythm. Others shouted his name. Tears streamed down the face of a young woman in the front row, an immigrant student from Burkina Faso, who had never seen her country's leader stand so tall on foreign soil. Maxine Waters, usually sharp and unshaken, sat frozen. The lights above seemed harsher now, exposing her stunned silence. She had walked into this debate expecting to dominate with words, but instead found herself defenseless against a truth that required no shouting. The host shifted nervously, unsure how to steer the show forward. Let's move on," he stammered. But the crowd wasn't ready to move on. The chant of Traoré began rising from the audience. Backstage, producers argued frantically through their earpieces. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was history unfolding live and across the world. Screens flickered with replays. Social media flooded with captions. One sentence that shook the room. The night was no longer under control. By dawn the next day, the clip had reached every corner of the internet. TikTok was flooded with edits of Traoré's steady words overlaid with dramatic music. Twitter hashtags trended globally. Traoré silences Waters and queer dignity over insults. In Burkina Faso, entire neighborhoods crowded around tiny phone screens, replaying the moment again and again. Old men who had lived through decades of humiliation wiped tears from their cheeks. Finally, one whispered, "Someone has spoken for us." In Washington, journalists scrambled for statements. Some defended Waters, saying she had simply been tough, but most headlines told a different story. Traoré's calm words echo louder than insults. Waters, meanwhile, avoided interviews. Her office issued a short message. No comment at this time. But silence only made the storm worse. For Traoré, the attention was overwhelming. He received calls from African leaders, messages from strangers. Even handwritten letters slipped under his hotel door. But he did not celebrate. He sat quietly in his room, the letter of a child in his hand. "Thank you for making me proud to say I am from Burkina Faso." It was a victory, but it felt heavier than triumph. That evening, Traoré met with his small team of aides. Their faces were filled with excitement. "Mr. President, the world admires you now," one said eagerly. "This is a chance to show Africa's strength." But Traoré did not smile. He rubbed his forehead. His eyes shadowed with worry. "Admiration is not the same as understanding," he murmured. His aide frowned. "What do you mean?" Traoré leaned forward. "Today they cheer my words. Tomorrow they may twist them. Do not forget we stand in a world where respect for Africa is fragile." The room fell silent. For all the praise outside, inside the hotel, it felt like the calm before another storm. Traoré walked to the window, staring out at the glowing city skyline. "I did not come here to be a star on social media," he whispered. "I came here to remind them that dignity cannot be traded." His aides watched him in silence, realizing that behind the calm reply on stage was a man carrying a burden far heavier than applause could lift. The week was far from over. The real test was only beginning. By Tuesday morning, political circles in Washington were in uproar. Some congressmen defended Maxine Waters, saying she had only spoken her mind, but others whispered that she had crossed a dangerous line. On the streets, reactions were even stronger. Outside the Capitol, protesters held signs. "Respect Africa and dignity is not an insult." Across the ocean in Ouagadougou, people danced in the markets, waving Burkina Faso's flag, singing, "Our voice is heard." Meanwhile, Traoré sat quietly in his hotel room, refusing interviews. He watched the coverage unfold, his face unreadable. To him, this was not about Waters. It was about history. "Mr. President," one aide said, "they are painting you as a hero now." Traoré turned slowly. "No," he answered, his voice calm. "A hero seeks glory. I only spoke the truth. And truth does not need praise. It needs protection." Still, he knew the storm was only beginning. When truth collides with pride, the world always trembles. That evening, the streets outside Traoré's hotel were filled with supporters chanting his name. Some carried candles, others carried homemade banners with his words, "Dine over fear." Inside, the president sat alone by the window, watching the flickering lights below. He thought of his people back home, farmers, children walking to school barefoot, mothers carrying water for miles. Did they know their president's words were echoing across the globe? His phone buzzed with messages from African leaders congratulating him. But he scrolled past them. What mattered most to him wasn't power, but the little boy he once was. The child who had promised himself that Africa would one day stand tall. As the chants grew louder, Traoré whispered to himself, "Let their voices rise higher than mine." That is leadership. For the first time since the clash, he closed his eyes and allowed a single tear to fall. By midweek, the pressure on Maxine Waters had become unbearable. Her office was flooded with calls, some in support, but most in outrage. Social media roasted her. Clips replayed endlessly, each time showing her silence after Traoré's response. Journalists camped outside her residence, shouting questions. "Do you regret your words? Will you apologize to President Traoré?" But she gave no answers. She avoided cameras, avoided the public, her once bold voice now missing from the headlines. Across America, the silence was interpreted as defeat. Across Africa, it was celebrated as victory. But for Traoré, it was not about winning or losing. He told his aides quietly, "When someone falls silent after truth is spoken, it is not humiliation. It is reflection. And reflection is sometimes the beginning of respect." His words spread online, quoted widely, sparking deeper conversations. People weren't just talking about a clash. They were talking about dignity, about justice, about the power of staying calm when insulted. And the week still had days left to unfold. Wednesday morning, Traoré's phone buzzed with an international call. It was his younger sister speaking from Ouagadougou. Her voice trembled with pride. "Brother," she said softly, "do you know the children in our neighborhood were crying with joy? They watched you on a tiny television. They said our president made the world listen to us." For a moment, Traoré could not speak. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear, eyes watering. She continued, "But please be careful. Not everyone will be happy with what you said." Traoré finally found his voice. "I did not speak to make them happy. I spoke so that the boy who carries water at dawn, the girl who studies by candlelight will know their lives have value." When the call ended, he sat in silence, staring out at the morning sky. His shoulders carried more than a nation. They carried every hope, every wound, every dream of his people. Later that day, Traoré faced a press conference. The hall was packed with reporters, their microphones flashing like stars. One American journalist stood up, her tone sharp. "President Traoré, some say your response embarrassed the United States. Do you regret your words?" The room grew still. Camera zoomed in. Traoré leaned forward slowly, his gaze calm. "Regret? No. Because respect is not an insult. Respect is a bridge. And if one sentence shook the ground, then maybe the ground was never strong to begin with." There was silence followed by a wave of applause. Reporters, often trained to hide emotion, found themselves nodding, even clapping. That clip traveled across the world within hours. Headlines screamed, "Traoré stands his ground with grace." Back in Africa, young people replayed it proudly. One student tweeted, "For the first time, I don't feel small, I feel seen." Meanwhile, Maxine Waters sat alone in her office, blinds drawn, the world's criticism echoing in every news report. She had built her career on boldness, but now she felt something she hadn't in years. Doubt. Traoré's words replayed in her mind, haunting her silence. For hours, she avoided calls, but eventually she picked up one from an old friend. The voice on the other end was gentle. "Maxine, maybe this isn't about politics anymore. Maybe it's about listening." Waters said nothing. She stared at her reflection in the darkened glass of the window. For the first time, she wondered if the man she had tried to humiliate had instead exposed something deeper. The world's reluctance to respect those it sees as small. Her silence was not weakness. It was the slow, painful birth of realization. And as the week pressed on, both she and Tro knew this clash was no longer just a debate. It was becoming a lesson for the world. Thursday morning, a staff member knocked gently on Tro's hotel door. In his hand was a small white envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from an American school teacher. Dear President Traoré, I watch the exchange on television with my students. Many of them are African-American children who often feel invisible. After your words, I saw their eyes shine with pride. For once, they felt dignity in their heritage. You did not just speak for Burkina Faso. You spoke for them too. Thank you. Traoré read the letter slowly, his fingers trembling. He placed it carefully on the desk, then bowed his head in silence. Even across oceans, he whispered, truth finds those who need it most. His aides noticed his quiet tears, but said nothing. They understood that this was not about politics anymore. It was about something larger, a shared cry for respect. The letter spread through social media after the teacher posted her copy. Soon thousands were writing their own notes of gratitude. And in that moment, Traoré realized his words had become more than a defense. They had become a mirror of hope. That evening, Traoré insisted on leaving the hotel without cameras or security detail. He walked through the streets of New York quietly, blending with the crowd. He stopped at a small park where families played, and street musicians filled the air with soulful jazz. Nobody recognized him at first. He sat on a bench watching life flow around him. A young boy selling snacks approached timidly. Sir, do you want some peanuts? He asked. Traoré smiled and bought a small pack. The boy looked at him closely, then gasped. You're the man from the TV. Before Traoré could answer, the boy whispered, My mom cried when she saw you. She said, You gave her hope. The words pierced him deeper than applause ever could. He crouched down, placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder, and said softly, Then tell your mom that hope belongs to her, not to me. The boy nodded with wide eyes, and in that quiet corner of the city, Traoré felt the weight of his mission heavier than ever. By Friday, the narrative in the media began to shift completely. Commentators who once mocked Traoré now praised his composure. Editorials appeared in major newspapers with titles like The Power of Dignity in a Loud World. In Burkina Faso, schools held special assemblies. Teachers played clips of Traoré's response to Maxine Waters, encouraging children to believe that their voices too carried value. Meanwhile, Maxine Waters remained hidden from the spotlight. Yet behind the silence, sources whispered she was shaken, deeply reflecting on the moment. Her inner circle urged her to respond, but every draft statement she wrote felt empty compared to the weight of Traoré's truth. That day, Traoré addressed a small African diaspora community. His words were steady. This week was not about me. It was about every person who has been told they are less. Remember this. The world cannot define your worth. Only your dignity can. The crowd wept openly. Many rushed forward to shake his hand. Others simply bowed in respect. And as the sun set that evening, it became clear. The story had grown bigger than a clash. It had become a movement. Saturday morning, in the heart of New York City, something remarkable happened. Hundreds of people, Africans, African-Americans, students, activists, even curious strangers gathered outside a community center where Traoré was scheduled to speak. They carried handmade signs. Dignity over fear. Respect Africa. Truth cannot be silenced. When he entered the hall, the crowd erupted, not in chaotic cheers, but in heartfelt clapping. Slow, heavy, meaningful. Taking the stage, Traoré paused for a long moment. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of history. I am not here as a man above you. I am here as a man among you. The struggle for respect is not mine alone. It belongs to all who have been overlooked, all who have been silenced. If my words reached you, then they belong to you now. People sobbed openly. Mothers hugged their children tighter. The hall felt less like a speech and more like a prayer, echoing deep into the night. That evening, news broke that Maxine Waters herself would attend a televised forum the next day. Rumors swirled. Would she attack again? Would she defend herself? When she walked onto the stage, the world held its breath. Cameras zoomed in, expecting fire. But instead, she looked weary, her voice softer than ever. I underestimated him, she admitted. I tried to shame him, but his words revealed something greater than my criticism. They revealed dignity. The audience froze in disbelief. Some clapped hesitantly, others simply stared. Traoré, watching from his hotel, remained silent. His aide turned to him. Do you think she means it? He replied calmly. What matters is not her words today, but what she chooses to do tomorrow. Still in that moment, the clash that had started with insult and silence had turned into something else. An uneasy but powerful recognition. On Sunday, before leaving the United States, Traoré addressed one last crowd. Cameras streamed live across continents. His words were simple, yet they struck like thunder. Respect is not given by the powerful. It is claimed by the courageous. This week you did not witness me. You witnessed the spirit of a people who refused to bow. And if my voice shook the room, it was because it carried millions behind it. The hall erupted in standing ovation. People wept uncontrollably, some holding their hearts, others whispering prayers of gratitude. Across Africa, televisions replayed the moment. Across the U.S., families sat in silence, reflecting on every word. As Traoré stepped down from the stage, the world knew one thing. What began as an insult had ended as a legacy. My dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, if it made you feel proud, then don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe to keep voices of dignity alive. Smash that like button if you believe respect is stronger than insults. And most importantly, drop your feelings in the comments. Tell me the moment that broke you, the moment that lifted you, the moment you'll never forget. Because this story is not just for watching, it's for carrying in your heart. And you are the reason it lives.